Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this virtual program today. I apologize that we are getting started a few minutes late. We're having a little technical difficulty. Ray Bird, who is the vice president of the Louisa chapter of the NAACP, was going to give the introduction today, but we're having a little bit of difficulty getting his camera working. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speaker, and then I'll turn it over to him for his presentation, and then hopefully I can get Ray in to do the goodbye. My name is Carlene Kovalchik. I am the Executive Director of the Louisa County Historical Society. I am very excited to be here for a second virtual program with Michael Carter Jr. If you'd like to see his first talk, it's available on our YouTube channel. Michael Carter is an 11th generation farmer and is the 5th generation to farm on Carter Farms, his family's century farm in Orange County, Virginia, where he gives workshops on how to grow and market ethnic vegetables, farm business management, food safety, and a host of other agricultural and African American history workshops, seminars, and trainings. He has a whole slew of experience, but I also know that he's got a lot of great information for us today. So I'm going to turn it over to him so we can listen to all that he has to tell us about Africulture today. The last piece of business to get started is there is a chat room on the right of your screen. So if you have any questions or difficulties, please send us a chat and I will make sure that we address those questions at the end. Thank you so much.
Good morning. How are you? Good morning, everyone. Welcome this morning. I am Michael Carter Jr. of Carter Farms. And today we'll be talking about Africulture. Africulture is a nonprofit arm of Carter Farms that promotes, trains, educates individuals, institutions about the various contributions of people of African descent and plants of African descent to agriculture. So today we're going to be talking about the plants, a little bit about the people, but a lot more about the plants. And I am at my son's soccer game, so if you hear a parent or cheering noises in the background, it's not me, but it's the people around me. So I just want to let you know that yeah, I'm back in parental mode. But this is a little bit about what we do here at Carter Farms. And why Africulture? As I stated earlier, Africulture highlights the contributions of peoples and plants of African descent to the world. We really focus on education, and education in the sense of a system of solving problems. By educating ourselves, we have a great responsibility to challenge our social norms and cultural norms that can be debilitating to certain groups, and definitely, challenge different ideas, especially for African Americans. Many of our connotation with agriculture and African Americans is the enslavement period, the enslavement of Africans, as to work plantations across this country, and tobacco fields and cotton fields, etc. So Africulture desires to solve a problem in the African American community of a declining youth population in agriculture. And contrary to a lot of popular opinions, I feel and I know that agriculture is the world's oldest profession. As we look at what we share today, please think about what would life in America be like without some of these contributions. And I like to be interactive as much as possible. So if I pause or anything like that, I'm just kind of filling out for questions because that's just how I generally present. So our first contribution is not a contribution at all, but it's kind of a overview of the father of botanical nomenclature, Carl Linnaeus. And these are also the fathers of scientific racism. Many of the plants that I may mention kind of fall under, they may not always be considered to be African plants or African derived plants, but there's a lot of bias within the nomenclature and the origins of a lot of these plants. And Carl Linnaeus is a reason for this. His perspective of people of African descent became the standard for scientific racism. And he pretty much wrote the book, literally for scientific racism. And that racism has infected every aspect of or this Western life, actually world life, not excluding agriculture and especially botanical nomenclatures. And this is just a little bit about his scientific racism. And based upon the scientific racism that he had, especially with the Afrikaners people, uh, it was perceived that nothing really good or productive came out of Africa as well. And that has been an issue that plagues our people to this day and this world to this day. We don't really see Africans really contributing a lot to society historically because of the way various histories are shared and written. But Africulture desires to really challenge that and bring to light a lot of different contributions outside of what we generally know from our standard schooling and education. So the first contribution we want to talk about is the cow. And the African auroch was the first ancestor of the modern cow. About 700,000 years ago or so, on this artifact of an African auroch, which is, they call it like the wolf cow, but it's the father of what we know today as the bovine species. And within ancient Egypt and various other ancient African cultures, we find indications of cows to the point today that the domesticated African boss or taurine cattle is the source of a lot of the cows that we utilize today. Familiar with Kenyan culture, you'll see the Maasai cows. A lot of these cows are considered very sacred, just like they are in Hindu cultures as well. And they are a significant sign of wealth. And many of our modern cows we use today, the Angus, the Hereford, Texas Longhorns, etc., are derived from this ancient African auroch and really are African boss cattle as well. And these cattle became much more winter prone once they made their way into Europe and able to sustain themselves in cold hardy as well as warm situations. As a vegan, I won't share too much about the cow, but I do know that they are derived from Northern Africa, and they are, significant portions, significant contributions to our history, as cattle is probably the largest agricultural product in the state of Virginia. Next, we have king cotton or white gold. Cotton is another African-derived crop. I was surprised when I was living in Ghana, West Africa, the amount of cotton plants that I saw in the villages within Ghana. And it made me explore a little further the history of this crop. And, this crop is an amazing crop that pretty much made America what it is today. Cotton was extremely productive and was one of those crops that shaped the course of America and pretty much set the hegemony for American domination and American empire. The African slave population was significantly required to utilize to be able to produce these crops that became synonymous with, as I say, king cotton in the South. You can see the expansion in this graph of how much and how many Africans were used to produce this crop, how much was producing between 1790 on up to 1860. The cotton gin was a tremendous invention that really revolutionized the cotton industry and made cotton the first global industry. Its value to the world's economy is equivalent to oil today. And the global cotton industry employed almost over 20 million individuals, including the 4 million enslaved peoples in the United States. Cotton was a huge crop. And as they say, it was the king of all crops and of pretty much all commodities in the US at the time. And again, made America the superpower that it is today. And you can't have cotton. It's tough to have cotton or even imagine cotton without indigo. Indigo is another African-derived crop that came from the Sierra Leone and Senegal area of Western Africa. And it was utilized then as a color or dyeing agent. So you'll find many mud cloths and other fabrics that use indigo to dye crops. To dye fabrics. And this is a tremendous crop that kind of, again, reshaped and really enhanced American economy in the 19th century, the late 19th century. And when you add indigo and cotton together, you can pretty much get the fabric of American culture. And that fabric, as we know, is called denim. Now, I don't own a pair of denim blue jeans, but my sons do. Uh, Everybody I know, for the most part, except for me, probably owns a pair of denim blue jeans. And both of these are contributors, or both of these are African contributions to American culture and the fabric of American life, um, both in terms of the crop as well as the people that produced it and created it. This next plant is not grown as much in the United States as it used to be, jute leaf. But if we are familiar with jute and jute rope, jute was a very common crop that was utilized quite a bit to produce rope. Rope was a valuable commodity in the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries, um, probably much more than it is now, with the uses in shipping, cargo, carrying, even mechanized agriculture. Rope was an incredible crop that needed, I mean, not a crop, but an incredible commodity that needed to be utilized pretty much in almost every household and definitely every farm. And the source of this rope was jute. Jute is an edible plant. The leaves are utilized quite a bit in West African culture. It's derived from Northeast Africa, from Egypt, where it's called malakia. And it's a crop that's drought resistant. It's also can be kind of flood resistant as well. It grows very fast, very tall, but very thin. Um, it resistant to a lot of insects. And again, it's utilized as a great soup thickener. It has the same principles and characteristics as a okra, in which it has the mucus or slimy nature to it. So it thickens up a lot of soups, stews, etc. But jute leaf is a very popular crop within West and East Africa. In Egypt, it's still eaten very much today, malakia, in terms of stews and soups, in West Africa as well. And the other rope of a nation. In this plant here, I'm not sure if you can make out the symbol of that leaf. That is the hemp or the marijuana plant, which is found initially in ancient Egypt. Some people give its origins to ancient Asian cultures, but most give it to Egypt, being that their culture in there was a little older than the Chinese cultures or the Asian cultures that it may have been derived from as well. So these plants, hemp and marijuana, was found on the walls of various tombs within ancient Egypt. Um, this goddess here that is over is called Sishet, and it was utilized quite a bit in a lot of different capacities, mostly for pain relief. However, they found and discovered there's residue of marijuana and marijuana oils inside the bodies of sarcophaguses of the ancient pharaohs that were mummified. So it's always been used as a healing plant within Africa, at least for a very long time, for well over 7,000, 8,000 years. And this is another crop that really doesn't get enough consideration for being an African crop, but it is coming derived from ancient Egypt, and it's all over the continent of Africa. Its use now is even predominantly used by Africans, with Ghana being the #1 consumer of marijuana in the world per capita. So these are great crops that have always had opportunities to kind of grow and expand. And there's a lot of what we call landrace crops within West Africa, and I guess all over Africa. Landrace are specific crops that have not been hybridized or popularized. And these land races, special strains of marijuana, are significant in terms of their healing abilities, where there's various other compounds outside of the standard THC that are used. An amazing crop, an amazing plant that's been with us for centuries now and brought over here by the ancient Africans. And now we know it as weed and marijuana and hemp. This is one of my favorite crops that I really didn't know was an African crop for a long time until I was living in Africa. And when I was living in Africa, I was working on a farm, and they said they grew cowpeas. And me and my arrogant self, I kind of just nodded my head like I knew what cowpeas were. And I went to the field and I'm like, these aren't cowpeas, these are black-eyed peas. Well, they're one and the same for the most part. So cowpeas are another great nitrogen fixing crop that comes out of Africa as well. The tradition for cowpeas or black-eyed peas, and they were called cowpeas in the 17th century, pretty much because that's what they fed to the cattle. They didn't think it was fit for human consumption, but ancient Africans had been eating them for a very, very, very long time. And a tradition that came out of the African community, both the enslaved community as well as the traditional African community, is eating these cowpeas or these black-eyed peas on the first day of the year. And this is a tradition that was started by the enslaved in this country to kind of pay reverence to what they were used to having within Africa. So if you see the dish to the right, that dish is called red red. It's a phenomenal dish that's made in West Africa, in Ghana especially. And the red red, they call it red red because it's derived from palm oil and red plantains or ripe plantains. They call the ripe plantains red. And you see a similarity between this and what's generally done with tomato stew and black-eyed peas in today's culture. Because, you know, palm oil was not popular within the 18th, 19th centuries here in America. The enslaved population didn't use necessarily the palm oil, but they found another red. They used tomatoes to make a tomato pudding or tomato paste to go along with these cowpeas. And it's how I love my cowpeas. And I've been eating these the first of every year since I can remember for a long time. And I always enjoyed the tomato aspect of it, the tomato pudding or the tomato sauce that generally accompanies the black-eyed peas. And again, this is owed for my enslaved ancestors who wanted to still have a semblance of what home was and a remembrance of what home is for them. So they always gave us reminders within our food and our food cultures. Both cowpea is still grown here today, the southern cowpea or the southern Carter pea. I grow it at my farm, or we'll be growing it this year. And it's a staple in American culture and American society, especially within Virginia. Now, this next crop is called gumbo. In Senegal, the original name for okra, or the traditional name for okra, is gumbo. And gumbo here we know as like a stew, which would have been okra stew as we would have known it today. Again, the enslaved and not and the free Africans within that southern Louisiana bayou area of the country, Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, had a lot of enslaved individuals that still had their roots within West Africa. And instead of calling this plant okra, they still refer to it as its traditional name, its Wolof name of gumbo. So gumbo became synonymous with okra stew, which is made all over Western Africa. As this stew, an assortment of vegetables with okra, maybe a little small meat, rice, and a whole bunch of other things as a base for this stew. So we can see again kind of the synergy between the enslaved Africans and their food culture, and really not letting go of their African heritage with either names or cooking traditions that are still held to this very day. This is another one of my favorites, the groundnut, which is the father of the peanut, as we know. So we all know the peanut, and many of us, unfortunately, now experience a lot of peanut allergies. But the groundnut is a precursor to the peanut, or probably a bigger brother of the peanut, grown in West Africa. And it's dynamic. I mean, it's very similar in everything to the peanut. The groundnut and the peanut are almost synonymous right now in West Africa. And this is another traditional African crop that was brought here by the enslaved, and or at least on enslaved ships that we utilize to this day. Now, who made the groundnut or the peanut famous was the great African American scientist and pioneer George Washington Carver, who again utilized some aspect of his biological understanding of the groundnut or the peanut, and created more than 300 different variations of groundnut or peanut. One of the variations that I love, that you really don't find that much in America, is groundnut stew or peanut soup. My goodness, that's a tremendous meal. Um, you found it occasionally in Virginia at the Roanoke Hotel in Roanoke. They have a variation of the groundnut stew. I was there with some African colleagues, an African friend of mine, and they told me that was not groundnut stew. Uh, but it's probably the closest to groundnut stew you'll get without being in West Africa. But this stew is tremendous. I encourage you to find a recipe for it and make it yourself. It goes great with cornbread. My goodness, my goodness. Uh, but again, another great African contribution to American society and culture. We can't imagine a jelly sandwich without peanut butter, and you wouldn't have a peanut butter without the peanut. One of those hidden jewels of our culture, another staple, is the kola nut. And this kola nut was a tree-grown nut that grows on the banks of West Africa, all over West Africa, especially in the arid areas, northern Ghana, eastern Nigeria. And this kola nut is very high in caffeine. It's literally like 5-day energy. Again, when I was working in West Africa, I almost had discovered this nut, but I noticed the nut that my security men were eating. And they were just, they had the nut and they would eat pieces of it, chew on pieces of it. And I asked them why they ate it, and said it gave them energy, allowed them to stay up all night when they were on security for a 24-hour detail. So it's a naturally caffeinated nut or crop that was discovered by P.J. Pemberton, the inventor of what we know today as Coca-Cola. He combined the cola nut with the leaves of cocoa or cocaine, and then combined that with some spices as well to give us what today was is the modern day Coca-Cola. But the cola nut was also used for the Pepsi Cola, RC Cola, and all the other colas that have come out since then as a source of caffeine. So this source of caffeine has been a part of African culture for many years. It's considered very much a delicacy within Nigeria, and it's generally given to guests who've traveled a long way or have come to someone's home for ceremonies. Individuals will provide water and put the nut in it and stir it up as a nice caffeinated drink to quench their thirst and also give them an extra boost of energy. And this gentleman here is another great African pioneer that very few know about, but his name is Tete Kwashi. Tete Kwashi didn't invent the chocolate, but he created or commercialized the cocoa tree. Tete Kwashi in the late 1800s had discovered, went to what is now, what's the small country there? I can't think of the country at the hand. It is its modern name now. But he visited this country in Central Africa and acquired a few cocoa trees. And he brought it back to his home country in Ghana, West Africa, to the eastern region more specifically, and grew out this crop. And this crop did well, and he shared the seeds with farmers in his community. And from pretty much the late 1800s till probably the mid 1900s, actually not even mid 1900s, until almost 2000s, Ghana was the leading producer of cocoa in the world. Now they're the second leading producer, with Ivory Coast, which is the nation right above Ghana, being the leading producer. And these are pretty much the same people groups, still produce over 60 to 75% of the world's cocoa year after year. However, when many of us think about cocoa and chocolate, we didn't think about Swiss and Swiss Miss. I'm sorry, you lost the sound connection. I'm sorry. Swiss Miss, but we think about the Cadbury Bunny or Mars or Hershey or a whole bunch of Yoo-Hoo, whole bunch of other things within our context when we think about chocolate. We never really think about Tetakwashi. We never think about the Ghanaians and Ghanaian peoples and farmers who grow tons and tons of chocolate every year. chocolate is one of those things, or cocoa is one of those things that they don't get the type of value they need to get for it. They don't, it hasn't been shared with them the amount of value that it's in this country in terms of how people look at and view chocolate and consume chocolate. So that individuals sell cocoa for about maybe for a 62-pound bag of cocoa. They generally get about maybe $100 for that 62-pound bag. That's 120 kilos, 125 kilo bag. So it's still a lot of discrimination within this sector of not getting more value for the producers of the raw material. And much more of the money goes to the refiners of this material. But again, Teji Kwashi is the father of chocolate. Without him, chocolate would be very, very, very rare. Chocolate was grown, quite a bit of cocoa was grown within South America, but it wasn't grown commercially. And as the name implies, its technical name, which means food for the gods, Aroma cocoa. Then this next gentleman is another great individual who, kind of complements chocolate, because you generally, when you think of chocolate, you also think of its compatriot vanilla. And this gentleman, his name is Edmund Albius. Edmund Albius was enslaved African off of the coast of Madagascar in a little island called Reunion, which is an African island that the French colonized. And Mr. Albius at the time was 12 years old and created a technique for pollinating the vanilla orchid that pretty much created the vanilla pod, which creates the vanilla today. This orchid, was pollinated, therefore not producing its pod or its bean. And this technique that Mr. Edmund Albius created when he was 12 years old is still used today to create vanilla and vanilla beans. This is why vanilla beans are so expensive, because of the hand pollinated technique that's utilized to produce the vanilla. And this area of the world, southeastern Africa, is the hub of all vanilla production. Madagascar is still a great hub for vanilla, as well as the Union, which I believe now is a part of Madagascar. So without Mr. Edmund Albius, we would probably not have vanilla as we know it today. And these are another great contributions of enslaved individuals who, despite their circumstances, were able to create and provide innovation in a field, or an area that, again, most of us never even considered or thought about. But his innovation added to the fabric and the sweetness and the flavor of American society. It's another young genius here. His name is Henry Blair. And I like to mention him because without him, a lot of things within agriculture would not be. Henry Blair created or invented the planter, the corn planter, and then later the cotton planter. And we've seen probably, us being in rural areas and living, or this being here in planting season at this time of year, seeing those big row combines and planters that are used to plant the corn, the wheat, the soybeans in the fields around us. Well, the original patent for this was done by Mr. Henry Blair at a very young age. Again, he was in his early 20s, but unfortunately he was enslaved. And his reality within that process allowed for the laws to be changed after he received his patent, where any enslaved African would not receive credit for their patent because of the owner, the person who deemed ownership of the enslaved person was ruled owner of the patent. But prior to that, Mr. Blair did receive his patent. However, he died a little bit later. Mr. Blair was from Silver Spring, Maryland, and his contribution, again, to agriculture is paramount to production of agriculture. He did a great job of inventing this. We had one of these plows at our farm, one of these planters at our farm, an older version, not necessarily a newer one, but not necessarily the first one as well. But it's a great invention and a patent that makes total sense, and it's still utilized today with manual seeders as well as mechanical seeders that's pulled on the back of a John Deere tractor. and Mr. George Crumb and Elizabeth Crumb were another group of innovative individuals in the late 19th century. Again, Mr. Crumb was an entrepreneur and a restaurateur, along with his wife, Elizabeth. And they invented a unique convection that, pretty much took the world by storm. The invention was called the potato chip. It's believed that a customer came to Mr. Crumb's restaurant and asked for some chips, which at that time were, from a European standpoint, were French fries, as we know it. But they kept wanting a thinner and thinner chip. He kept sending his order back to the point I'm sure Miss Crumb probably took over and said, you know what, we're going to slice this razor thin, fry it up, and serve it. And when they fried it up and served it with a little bit of salt, it became a huge hit and a bestseller at his restaurant. And from there, the potato chip was born, as we know it today. Before there was Lay's or Utz, there was Mr. Crumb and his potato chips. And I know many of us probably utilize this beverage here, but the birthplace of this particular crop is in Ethiopia. And this crop is called coffee. And if you ever had Ethiopian coffee, I'm not a big fan of coffee, but I have had Ethiopian coffee. And this is okay. I don't really like coffee too much. But the best coffee in the world is ideally grown in the highlands of Ethiopia. And they make theirs a very dark coffee, a very black coffee. But they were the progenitors of the coffee and the coffee bean. They're still one of the leading producers of coffee within Africa. Not the world, but definitely within Africa. And shared their beans and their gift throughout all of pretty much the Arabias, Northeast Africa, on into Asia, and down to Southern Africa. And now coffee is probably one of the most staple beverages outside of water in this country. With the advent of Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts, and so many other coffee shops popping up here and there. We have to thank Ethiopia for this particular crop and what it's provided for us to give us that extra boost and jolt in the morning or sometimes in the afternoon. And this gentleman here, another great mind who was, without him, you can't imagine life and his contributions. Or you can't imagine life without his contributions. This gentleman's name is Frederick Jones. Frederick Jones was the co-founder of a company called Thermo King. And Mr. Jones invented the refrigerated truck and then the modern freezer as well. And with Mr. Jones' invention, we were able to have cool drinks, vegetables, and the like. We're grateful for Mr. Jones' invention. And Thermo King is still up and rolling to this day. There's still Thermo King trucks. I happen to work with the farm who was a distributor for Thermo King products, Thermo King refrigeration when I was in Ghana. But his contribution shaped and changed American society across the board in terms of being able to ship fresh, cool, frozen produce that wouldn't spoil in transit. He really made, I guess, logistical dynamics within agriculture a reality. His contributions aided in the war efforts in World War II, and again, changed American life as we know it today, to the point now that you really can't imagine life without a cool beverage. And as a farmer, I could imagine how I transport vegetables without keeping them cool and spoiling. Well, that's just a little bit of what we wanted to share today in terms of agriculture and the agriculture contributions. There are other crops that we definitely can go into, like sweet potatoes, watermelons, loofah gourds. There's so many crops that have come from Africa that have shaped, our culture today. But I just wanted to share a few with you, and kind of help reshape minds about African contribution to agriculture. We were not just slaves picking cotton and tobacco. Our contributions were far greater than that, and really changed the course of American society by adding crops usually from West Africa and East Africa that changed the course of a new world, changed how we ate, what we ate, when we ate, what we drank, how we drank it. So this is a little bit of that's my presentation. You can find us more information at thecarterfarms.com. My son's seed company at carterbrothers.net. You can contact me also at carterfarmsva@gmail.com. And if you're on social media, you can like us at Carter Family Farms or on Instagram at Carter Farms VA. I want to thank everybody for their time. I appreciate everything you shared, and then I'm open up to any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much, Michael, for another great presentation. I'd actually like to take a moment to turn it over to Ray with the Louisa chapter of the NAACP, since we had technical difficulty at the start of the program, for him to do a little introduction.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for bearing with me with the technical difficulties that I had this morning. There's just a little switch in between two of the programs. But, just to kind of back up a little bit, we wanted to start to do something within our community that highlights the efforts of African-American culture past the month of February. So we were able to, brainstorm together with Louisa Historical Society and come up with an idea of, something virtual, something everybody can be easy, accessible to on a month-to-month basis, and have, different local presenters come on and talk about different things that, you may know about or you may not know about, and just have some cultural enrichment to many different areas of the African-American contribution to American society. And we definitely like to thank Mr. Carter for coming in today and, speaking on this topic and, taking some time out of his busy schedule. We really appreciate it. And, these things this will go on a month-to-month basis. We'll get the word out to everybody on which platform we'll be using. But I think this is just the start of something great. And for everybody to be able to spread the word of what we're doing. And so the community has knowledge of what we're doing would be awesome.
Wonderful. Thank you. And for those of you who are not aware, we do make our virtual programs available on our YouTube channel. So if you enjoyed today's presentation and you have friends or family members that weren't able to attend, you can share that link with them as well. And we do send out evaluations after our virtual programs, and we always appreciate if you can take a few minutes to fill those out. We do use them. That's actually how Mr. Carter came back to us. One of the comments that we got during his last presentation about the history of his family farm was people wanted to learn more about the actual crops. So we're happy that he could come back and join us today. And it does not seem like we have any questions. I'm going to give it a few more minutes just in case anyone has any questions before we say goodbye for the day.
Eunice, you got questions, I know.
I think last time somebody had a question about, is it red? Is that how you say it? Yeah, about
yeah.
If you could direct them to a good recipe or cookbook or.
Yeah, the best recipe is in Ghana, so you just book a trip. You'll get a on the internet. You'll find, and I don't have any good recipes per se that I can direct them to, but if you do a search on Google or whatever your search engine of choice is, search authentic Ghanaian red recipe. The key to red is the balance of the palm oil, the salt with the tomatoes, and then the right plantains. The plantains, I mean, if you really want them, the black ones, the really ripe ones, you fry those, and when they're really ripe, when you fry them, they're much sweeter, much sweeter. Have you ever had regular plantains, plantain chips that not as ripe? But red is by far one of my favorites. Between red and peanut stew. And I am a cook. I used to be a cook at some point, but I won't give you a solid recipe. I will say that, but you can find some good ones. Look for Ghanaian or Nigerian or maybe Senegalese. Actually really Ghanaian recipes and authors of recipes. These recipes, I don't know, they take you back. They make you think about another time and another place. One of my mentors, Dr. Brahmi Alagare, shared with me that's how he was able to introduce Alice Haley to his roots. He produced, or at least cooked, a groundnut stew, which is a peanut soup, and a palm nut soup. And he said Mr. Haley consumed the groundnut soup, and wiped it out, nothing left. And he was able to determine from there that he was probably from the Senegambia area, because that was a prominent soup in that area. And the rest, as we say, is history. And there's so many different aspects of our history and culture, especially in this area that we're in. I don't, growing up in this area, I never knew what, all the history that was here. I had no idea that Kunta Kinte was from Spotsylvania, and that's, the basis of roots and that whole culture is based in Spotsylvania County, Virginia. Considering that I grew up in Caroline County, Virginia, right next to Spotsylvania, and I had to ride to Spotsylvania to get to Orange, and actually probably past his farm to get to my family's farm, is a tremendous, I don't know, I guess a disservice, being a young man who had a great love for history. And we got to do a better job of sharing our history with our young people about all the various contributions we've created. And I'm going to answer some of those other questions in the comments as well. What can you do with dandelions from your yard? There's a great number of things you can do with dandelions. And dandelion, I'm not sure if it's an African crop, even though it's all over Africa. And that dandelion actually means lion's tooth. That's where the name is derived from. You see the lion at the end, and dandy, I believe, is Portuguese for teeth, like dente. And dandelion is a great, great crop. Every aspect of the dandelion can be utilized. Please do not poison the dandelion with Roundup, any of those poisons, weed be gone and all those kind of things. Dandelion is a great healer. You can utilize the root and make dandelion wine for those wine lovers out there. You can utilize the leaves for tea, as well as for like a salad. I love to put dandelions in my salad. They're very bitter, but you put a little bit in there, with a little bit of mint as well in your salad. It's a nice balance. Dandelions are great for your liver. Helps to cleanse out your liver, and liver always needs to be cleansed. So, if you drink or eat dandelions, you drink the tea or add it to your salads. But and they also can be sauteed as well, with a little bit of onion, a little oil. Again, they're a little bitter, but they are a good meal. And a lot of us have dandelions. No matter how much we have sprayed and fertilized our lawns, we still have a couple of dandelions here and there. When can we visit my farm? I would say probably in July, Miss Eunice. We'll be having what we call Black Farmer Month between July and August. As our brother said, we want to have a lot more events outside of Black History Month. And Black History Month is generally February. It's the shortest month and it's the coldest month of the year. Being African people, we like to be outside. We like to enjoy and embrace, longer months, and really do what we like to do, eat. And it's tough to have a cookout or a family gathering in February. So we're gonna probably don mid-July through August as Black Farmer Month, and we'll look to do some events there, as well as I know Ms. Hagler does a lot of great Juneteenth programs in Fredericksburg area. And Juneteenth, I think this year will actually fall on the 19th. We'll also do a Juneteenth program with the Orange County Art Studio, which is right on Main Street there in Orange. And I think Miss Eunice will probably have some flyers, and I'll have some flyers and information as well for our various Juneteenth presentations. And it says, what flowers can you grow safely grow and eat or garnish dishes? Great question. There's some excellent flowers you can utilize. African daisies are one. Nasturtium, another edible flower that you utilize. Dandelion is one. Marigolds also could be eaten as well. Those are just a few. I grow a couple of different flowers at our farm, and we'll be growing some this year from various parts of Africa. Birds of paradise, which is not edible, but there are some edible. Let me see. Well, they use like the birds of paradise to wrap food. So a lot of times you have beautiful flowers, and they have these big, silky, what do you call those things? Leaves. And those leaves can actually be used to wrap or garnish your plates. You find that a lot of high-end restaurants use banana leaves, which we grow at the farm as well. And banana leaves, they are are edible, but they're very stringy. You don't want to eat them per se, but they're great for a garnish. They're great to use as plates, great to use as something to put down over top of your plate to put your vegetables on. And you actually get some of the resin and the health effects of the banana leaf in your meals when you put hot food on them. It absorbs some of the oils from the banana leaf, which is high in potassium, really high in potassium and great. So a lot of times in West Africa, they will wrap their rice, what we call their wache, which is rice and beans, and sorghum leaf cooked together. Gives it a red color, but an excellent flavor. Wache is another great one. Wache is spelled Waakye, and it's made, again, with rice, beans, and red sorghum leaf. You can tell I love growing food. I don't like eating it as much as I do growing it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you everyone for joining us this morning. I am excited to hear that we can all get together on your farm sometime safely this summer. Looking forward to that. Absolutely. And thank you to the Louisa chapter of the NAACP for getting this whole program up and running. And we're happy to partner with you all and look forward to our future programs. All right.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.